Hello and welcome to the Captain's Table, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul, Berserker01, Batman Shelley, your humble host and space bartender at TheAstroPub, your favorite space bar at the end of the galaxy. Sit back, relax, enjoy the show. We've got a good one for you. This is the Captain's Table. This is a podcast usually dedicated to Star Citizen content, but many fans, many of my own fans just asked, hey, could you do something on Starfield? Because a lot of us Star Citizen creators are covering it for good reasons, because we all like space games. And so, getting some opinions out there from folks. And so I reached out to Morphologis and Space Tomato, because I knew both of them were excited and into for the game. And I think all three of us had early access to the game before the game actually released. So
we congratulations to you guys, by the way.
Thank you.
Being able to play that early.
Well, likewise.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so we have a unique perspective because we had multiple hours, 10, 20, 30 hours in the game before the game even reached other people. So I figured getting us together and talking about the game would be a good idea. But let's get started with introductions. I'm going to start with you, Space Tomato. Who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen? And where can they find you?
I'm a tomato.
Or
generally speaking.
In space, what do you do in space content? I can stop saying
yeah,
Star Citizen.
Space things.
Yes.
It's fun. Funny story, actually. It's like I have been waiting so long to be able to introduce another game to my content. I did a little bit of Halo. Like I'm very picky. I like space games. Like I'm very much about space games. I don't know what happened, but around the age of like 17, something in my mind broke and I couldn't enjoy other games as much. So Starfield coming out was just a breath of fresh air after seeing different games like Elden Ring and Zelda and all these other really good sort of RPG style games that just didn't really click with me. So I am a person who likes to cover space games, and generally that's been Star Citizen up until now, but now finally Starfield is included, and I'm hoping to include Star Wars Outlaws next year and a couple other things that come along. But that's basically what I do. I like to cover space games, generally from more of like a development, feature coverage kind of perspective. And I do that on Twitch and YouTube. And I post zingers on Twitter. And sometimes I'll be on Instagram for whatever reason. But generally, it's YouTube. So, Space Tomato on YouTube, you'll find me. I got 2 channels, Space Tomato and Space Tomato 2. Except not the number. Just 2. Yes.
Space Tomato as well. All right, let's thank you for that. Now we have Morphologist. Who are you? What do you do in space content? Because you actually have a longer space content history than I think both of us.
Yeah,
and
potentially. Yeah. I'm Morphologist, and I'm on YouTube primarily, but I also stream on Twitch. Though recently, for the past over week, I haven't streamed at all, which is really unusual for me, especially because the new patch has come out. But Starfield has been taking up a lot of my time for making YouTube content. Like I said, that's my primary thing. But I'm also on Twitter, and it's called X, whatever.
It's Twitter. It will forever be Twitter.
I don't know.
Yeah, Twitter, Instagram, and I also started a TikTok account to post shorts, but I haven't really been keeping up with that because it takes a lot of extra time to do that. But anyway, that's besides the point. I am very much with, and this is I don't want to dive too much on this yet, but I'm like really similar to Tomato, where like I've been covering a lot of Star Citizen primarily because really, honestly, there hasn't been much else to cover in my genre that I'm interested in. So like, Cyberpunk for a short period that was there, but after that, it's been forever. So Starfield is great. Finally, I'm covering something aside from Star Citizen, it's a great breath of fresh air because, recently content's been a little bit dry for Star Citizen. And before that, as you alluded to, I actually cut my teeth on YouTube making content for Space Engineers, which is it's not an RPG. It's more of like a building game if you're familiar with it. Yeah, but it's got like planets and stuff that you can fly up and down. It's not like super I don't know, complex or anything. It doesn't have like true Newtonian physics with the thruster locations like Kerbal Space Program, but it's just like detailed enough to have fun. And we made like a series on that and stuff with me and 2 other YouTubers. And then I moved to Taiwan, and unfortunately we weren't able to get back together because of our schedules. Before that, I did PlanetSide 2, actually. It was my first game I covered on my channel. Most people don't know that.
You just like space and sci-fi. I mean,
I do, yeah. I'm a huge fan of it.
A lot of people don't know that my first game was Kerbal Space Program.
Really?
Yeah,
Nice.
that was my first game I streamed. So a lot of
It's a
people don't.
great
Some good
game,
lore?
Yeah.
Yeah, great lore. Actually, it's got an entire hidden history that they were going to do and they never did. And it looks like KSP2
Aw.
they're trying to do that with like.
That's cool.
Fantastic.
It's basically have you seen 2001: Space Odyssey?
I have, yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's what the plot of Kerbal Space Program was. You find like monoliths and you unlock them, and then they send you to a place where you could have gone to. You have to build the end game of KSP's campaign was to build a interstellar starship and go to another place, and that place was Earth. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
I like
That's
it.
cool. I like that.
so
Spoilers.
Spoilers.
well, spoilers for a game that never finished its main plot line and will never come back. They're kind of doing
Aw.
they're kind of redoing it with KSP2. They're kind of adding those little elements back in for something like
I
that.
hope so. Yeah.
Spoiler for movies from the 70s. Well, there's more to it than that. There's some deep meaning in Space Odyssey 2001.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It's
man.
really interesting.
I
Stanley
gotta introduce my kids to that at some
Nuts.
point. Okay, they might watch this and get it spoiled.
Kubrick. Right?
Gosh, I didn't even think about that. Like we live in an era where, you know, if you do content online, your children will be able to go back and look at you when you were younger,
Oh my
saying and
gosh.
doing stuff that are stupid.
So many embarrassing
yeah.
things. Whatever
Well-
whatever the 20 years from now form of Reddit is, we're gonna find a lot of really embarrassing live stream clips of people's parents.
Yeah, no joke.
All right. Well, let's talk about Starfield. All right. I'll start with you, Morphologis, on this question. But the first thing is just generally, how are you enjoying or not enjoying Starfield? Just a general initial reaction. You know, elevator pitch. If someone's like, "Hey, how are you liking that game?"
Honestly, I'm really loving it. I made a video, and I'm not trying to self-plug here, but
Self-plug.
it-
That's what it's here for. Plug away.
Plug it in.
but I made a video called "Hope for a Struggling Genre," and I think most people didn't get that. But if you're like a big science fiction game fan, I think you'll kind of get what I'm talking about, because recently things haven't been going very well for this genre. Star Citizen has really been struggling to make good progress recently because of their focus on Squadron, and Elite Dangerous is sadly dying, and I never wanted that to happen. As much as, you know, like people like to poke fun of it as competition between the two, I want to see that succeed just as much as Star Citizen, and that's, you know, on the downslope. Unfortunately, No Man's Sky is 7 years old, you know, and it's not really the style that I was super. I mean, I enjoyed it, but it's not really like a realistic style in the way that Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen are. And aside from those titles, everything else is like really small and indie studio stuff. Like nobody's really doing really big, expansive space games anymore because they're just too expensive to do. They're usually very narrowly focused. So, you know, when Starfield was announced, I was super excited because I know Bethesda games. I know that they put a lot of love and care into them, and the stories are good. The lore is good. They're rich with stories in every nook and cranny. And so I was really excited to play a space game where they were going to really try hard to make like lots of planets and star systems and big scope game. And so like it definitely met my expectations. I figured out pretty early what the issues were going to be with it. Like I knew that they were going to have to cut some corners in order to make their game work. And that's totally fine. I was prepared for it and I love it. I mean, like I love it for what it is and for what their focus was. I think it's fantastic.
Awesome. Space Tomato, same question. What's your elevator pitch? When someone comes up and asks you, how are you enjoying Starfield? What's your honest response?
I am also loving it. I mean, I'm coming from the same angle as Morph. The thing I was saying a lot on my streams, and honestly, leading up to the game coming out, I expected a good space RPG. I didn't know how their personal brand of that might have changed over the last 10 years. I think it's been 10 years. Fallout 4 was what, 2015, 2014? Probably been like 9-8 years now. And I didn't know how much their formula would have changed since then. But when it came out, and then now that I've played it quite a bit, it has hit like exactly what I wanted from Skyrim when everybody was loving Skyrim. You know, it was a cultural phenomenon, that game. And it didn't really stick with me. I played it for probably like 20 hours. I loved what I saw. I had a ton of fun exploring. But I've never been a big swords, bow and arrow, and magic guy. I think there's good balance between that. It's a lot of fun to see. But I've always loved the idea of, traveling to different biomes and seeing different species and talking to people that are so disconnected from each other that one person is talking about their planet falling apart, the other person is talking about a food shortage in on their planet. Like, the expansiveness of space was something I always missed from the big RPGs that I loved growing up. Oblivion, Skyrim, even something that was sci-fi focused like Deus Ex, it was still constrained to a very specific story. So getting to go into Starfield and experience everything that made those games magical, updated 10 years, I mean, give or take, it does play a lot like Skyrim did, but put into this scale and this format that they couldn't pull off 10 years ago, has been everything that I hoped it would be. And that's not to say it's a replacement for any other game I play. I mean, there are a lot of other games I enjoy. Even Cyberpunk 2077 is something that I've started to enjoy more recently, but it's a different kind of, I'm going for something different there. And Starfield, I think, really slots into a very specific spot that I'm going to love playing for a pretty long time.
I'm gonna echo what both y'all said, because like the thing about it is I call there's a group of people who play Star Citizen, but there's the same people who play Elite and Space Engineers and Kerbal and stuff. We're space gamers. We enjoy space. We were somehow enthralled by the idea of space exploration, space travel, either when we were younger or older. Some of us were old enough that they remembered the Apollo program or the space shuttles, and or just were younger who just get inspired by things like SpaceX and the Curiosity, landing on Mars and stuff like that. But in general, I think space gamers we've been starving for content as of late, because a lot of the space and science fiction genre is either indie developers or AAA devs who bit off more than they can chew and have to spend years in afterwards making the game better. And Star Citizen, is a great example of it has a lot of potential. It could be great, or it could fall on its face tomorrow. But no matter what, we probably won't know for 2, 3, 5, 10, 20, however many years it takes for them to get beyond where they are now. And as a result, it can be kind of disheartening to look at the genre and be like, okay, I want this experience. I want to be insert space, hero here, but I can't, because there's no one who's desperate or not desperate, but bold enough to try it. Because as you say, Morph, it's really not. It's not really a popular genre, and I think it has a lot to do with money.
It does. It doesn't fit within that 2-year development cycle that so many studios are living and dying by nowadays. So.
Yeah.
When it does well, people love it.
Yeah.
Like in all media,
of course. I mean,
TV, movies, games, people do like it. It's like a feedback loop. It's hard to do, so not as many people can enjoy it. Not as many people enjoy it, so a lot of companies don't dish out the money to make it. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. But I think Starfield, and this is getting in a conversation. I'm sorry, Paul. You should finish what you were saying.
No, I'll go for it. I'm gonna build off of that anyway. So go ahead.
I mean, going back to the video, I was talking about Starfield, people getting interested in this genre on such a large scale as compared to, say, Star Citizen. If you really look at the numbers as compared to how many people have gotten into those games as compared to Starfield, it's astronomical. There's so many more people into this. It gives me hope that people are going to be interested in other games in the genre like Star Citizen, and that it could actually help the game and other games like it. So I'm very hopeful now for the future of space games because of the success of Starfield.
Oh yeah, I'm agree with you 100% on that one. I'm a big fan, a big believer of a rising tide floats all boats, and I think once people, because I am a longtime Bethesda fan. I played, my first Bethesda game was Morrowind on the original Xbox, so I remember that experience, and my wife, literally her first real game that she really bit into to become a gamer was Morrowind on a PC that she built herself out of spare parts. So
Wow.
yeah, and began to mod the game. Like she learned how to mod the engine and stuff like that. So so like I come from a Bethesda family, just to say the least. And as a result, playing Starfield, I will say, feels like the ultimate Bethesda experience. It's Bethesda without a previous IP that they had to worry about, so they can completely come up with whatever they wanted to. They didn't have a bunch of people being like, well, in the first game, or in, this game that was released in 1992, this was the lore, and now you have to, this is how, like, they're not getting constantly compared to their previous outings, so they have a chance to come in fresh with, and approach a new genre with their style. And I think they nailed it. I think this is probably the best Bethesda game that's been released. Now, that being said, I'm not saying it's the best game that's been released. I don't know if I would put Starfield as like a revolutionary experience, but I don't think that's what it was going for. I think it was going for an evolutionary experience, because
definitely
it's a formula that's old, and it's an engine that it's updated, but is old. It feels like a game from 2012, like, which is not a bad thing, but just,
yeah.
So let's move on to what was I going to say? We said the initial experiences. Let's talk about downsides. Can I kind of brought it up originally? Space Tomato, let's start with you on this one. What are some of the critiques you have with Starfield? What are some of the issues you have?
I feel like it's not necessarily bad, but like the fast traveling gets to me a little bit, and not that like, and I have trouble with that being a critique because I think it works well for the game. Mm-hmm. This is a super thick game. You have a lot of things to do and a lot of things to pay attention to. Being able to not have to worry too much about traveling does allow you to focus on those more important things more. I mean, inventory management is a lot. Ship customization is there. Outposting is there. You have a crew that you're trying to manage. And then on top of that, you have all these different quests you're doing, classic to a Bethesda game. So like, I want to say that it is a critique for the amount of like loading screens and fast travel that you have to deal with. But at the same time, it allows them to build a game that is much more dense in experience. That's been the biggest thing for me. There are a couple other like small things really that like stand out. For one, I do wish, given the amount of ways that they've made certain things easier, I really wish that you could access all of the inventories of your companions on your ship while you're on your ship, instead of having to walk up to each person and get this stuff from them. But that's getting really particular. I don't have really that many standout critiques for the game just yet. I mean, maybe I want to bounce off of you guys a little bit and use what you say, but I've just been all around enjoying it a lot. I think I've been working on a video for exploration in the game, and I'm surprised that I actually enjoy exploration more than I thought I would, because it feels rather dull at first. Obviously, you're doing a lot of that exploration in the star map itself, which could probably be fleshed out a little bit more. But once you get down on the planetary surface, suddenly there's more to do. It doesn't feel quite as empty and barren as people would have had you think when they mentioned that there were going to be so many planets. They do manage, I think, to keep up a decent amount of points of interest and things to do when you do land on a planet. But I would have preferred some ability to move around an atmosphere in your ship, or at least have a vehicle that you could drive around in to kind of still expand that scope of exploration. The game feels small despite it being so big. And I'm not sure if that is an objective criticism or if that's more kind of, well, I'm used to things like Star Citizen or No Man's Sky.
Mm-hmm. All right. Morphologis, your same question. What are your critiques of the game so far? What are your problems?
Well, actually, come some of the same as Space Tomato. On reflection, it didn't bother me at first, but the inventory management as you get to the late game gets a little bit cumbersome. Like having to go in between like different locations to drop stuff off and offload things. I kind of wish it was a little bit smoother and easier to work with for transferring between inventories. So that's definitely a weak point. It's just the way that it's been put together. Again, space travel as well. I think the fast travel, but on further reflection, I think it's not about the fast traveling. It's actually more about the method of traveling through space. So like when you arrive somewhere, like at a new planet, you arrive in orbit above it, and you can just immediately land. There's no gate that you have to go through. There's no like distance of travel that you need to go. So there's like you can choose not to be in any jeopardy whatsoever. So like the stealth mechanics that they did into the space game isn't really that important because you can just land and avoid anything that you might get in trouble with. I kind of wish they would have done something more like you have to fly to like maybe 1,000 kilometers or something in space, which won't take that long to land on this planet. I mean, like obviously I wish they did more. I wish that was seamless, but I understand why they did it where they just wanted to focus on the meat of the content, the actual stories and combat and stuff, like make that really, really good and kind of skimp a little bit on the technology because that was going to take a lot of time for very little benefit for the story. And I understand that perspective. I don't think that's entirely true. I think it would have added a lot, but I'm super happy without it because there's such a wealth of content to enjoy. And the last thing I think is this is more of an issue with Bethesda being an older game studio. The graphics in this game are great, like really, really good. And I think people are saying that like it looks old. The reason why it looks old is actually two reasons. The lighting, there's no ray tracing, and that makes a huge difference for how good something looks. Lighting is like almost everything. And the second thing is the animations. The animations for the characters are not all mocapped. Some of them are, like for the opening sequence, they mocap that, you can tell. Like it's very fluid, very natural, looks really good. But then when you go to like some of the side missions, which were obviously less resource intense for them, you can tell they did no mocap at all. There was an animation, some guy, an animator, who was doing a great job. But unfortunately, the job that they're doing was a job that was really good in 2012, but today should be done by like handheld mocaps. Like they need to get with the times is my feeling. I think that they're just too old fashioned. And this is just something that, because I'm sure they've got a lot of people there that have worked there for years, that they're used to doing things one way, and they need to start changing over to a new way of doing things that just makes a better product. So hopefully they can update their pipeline and make their animations better in the future. I mean, it doesn't bother me so much because the story's really good. The voice acting is amazing. But the animations, sometimes they feel a little bit out of place.
I want to add on to something that you said there about there not being really any risk when you're flying. Because I have a funny story. I'm gonna try and say it without any spoilers.
Okay.
So I had a bounty at one point, and I had a mission that I needed to do. It was a main story mission, and I needed to be in New Atlantis in the lodge. I needed to go back. And with this bounty, normally you're supposed to enter the city and they're supposed to stop you. Be like, okay, you have to do something with this bounty. You can't just go live. And with this particular situation, I couldn't just pay it off right away. So first time I did it, I went back to the place. Some stuff happened. I didn't like it. So I reloaded the save. And I went and I did the same exact thing again, but instead of loading straight to the lodge, which like you can literally say land at this specific location, I landed on the planet at the spaceport in the city. Walked into the city, they got me with the bounty, right? Because I had to walk past security and they were like, okay, no, you can't do that. There's no way you can back out of it because like I said, you can't pay off that bounty. So it took me away from the story that I wanted to do. I reloaded again and did the exact same thing. I loaded into the lodge, completely skipped over that, never had to worry about the bounty. And to this day, I'm still playing the game with nobody getting me for that bounty. And like, that's the kind of thing you can so easily skip over. You can do that in many different situations where like You don't want to fly in space. You don't want to go to a certain place. You don't want to have to walk out of the city that you're in to get going. And you can tell with certain missions when instead of the objective being go back to so-and-so place, the objective would be leave this city. And you know for a fact that that means there's going to be something happening outside of the city or at the entrance of the city that you have to go through for that mission to complete or that story to happen, or else they would just normally let you fast travel. And I feel like those are the little things that fast traveling everywhere kind of opens up the game to. You can kind of tell what's going on and sort of exploit it to get around things. And again, I don't know if that's necessarily an objective problem. I mean, this is a dense game, but it does make that kind of stuff more obvious.
Yeah, I think the problem is that they tilted too much towards the casual side with some of these features, and I understand why they did it. It's meant to appeal to a really large audience, but I think it's sometimes they kind of went too far, and it's to the detriment of the experience. As is Tomato, you're saying there. I agree.
I'm gonna agree with both of you on that one, because that's one of the things that I'm really like. I feel like you shouldn't be able to land at the lodge or like at a specific location in the city. I feel like you should have to walk through it, and I know that it's cumbersome and time consuming, but there are so many random encounters that happen and random events that happen in those cities that it's like you're almost hurting your audience by not getting to like walk down a road and hear, you know, security arguing with somebody about a lost pet, and then you don't even have to participate in that mission chain that pops up from it, but you could, you know, or just being like, hey, I just got jumped by the Crimson Fleet and barely made it out alive, but my ship's gone and I have no money, and you're like, oh, that sucks. It's like it builds the universe a little bit more. It makes you feel like you're actually, you know, like immersed in the universe, like this is an actual living universe beyond you. And I think by cutting that out, just being like fast travel, it kind of makes the game more about, let me just get to the next, like, let me hit my next dopamine hit, please. Monkey neuron activation, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely a big design decision. And I feel like as a company, you really got to think about how much of this game do we want to force the player to encounter because we know it will make the game better versus how much do we want to let them miss at the expense of us maybe wasting time on that kind of stuff for however many players do skip it.
Yeah. I kind of hope they do a hardcore mode where you're not allowed to fast travel.
Like
you have to go through the city gate. Yeah, you or something like that. And I'm sure if they don't do it, someone's going to mod it into the game. So we're going to see either way.
Yeah.
I'll say with my critique for the game, other than the fast travel stuff, which I think is not I think a lot of people have an issue with the fast travel, but I find that the issue with fast travel is more that it's confusing and you can easily miss a lot of the like actual animations and movement, which I know a lot of people don't like, but that kind of, again, it takes you out of the game a little bit. And it's like, oh, I'm just going to the next battle's cube that I can go into. But at the same time, I think the loading screens can be excessive. I know why they're doing loading screens, because the game engine can't handle a certain amount of entities or resources, or like in Neon. Dear God, there's so many loading screens in Neon.
Actually, I came to a realization that I don't know. I'll try to be as quick and concise about this as possible. Sure. Do you mind if I share this? Because it's related to this point. I've been using, I don't know if you guys saw my video, but I've been using FreeCam a lot, which is not a feature in the game, to capture a lot of my footage. And one of the things I did is I actually poked the camera outside the side of the ship and realized that they were rendering both the interior and exterior in space together, and other ships were having their interiors rendered as well. And the same thing on the ground is actually rendering the interior, but there's still a loading screen between them. And the reason why this is happening is because they didn't develop the same tech that CIG did. See, CIG does have loading screens, except not exactly. What they do is they have object container streaming, which is basically a really complex system that loads things in and out in the background as you approach and depart, so that your system can keep up. So you never have a loading screen. So like they still have it, but it's done in a way where you never notice that transition, right? Starfield and Bethesda never elected to go through that process. And so what we're seeing is the result of that, just hard loading screens in between with no breaking down of that loading process. I think that's really fascinating. It seems like if they'd have invested the time, they could have made Creation 2 engine work. They could have done it and made it work similar to Star Citizen. But the money and time that would have probably been required to do that, to test that system, would have been probably way out of the budget for the people that had in their studios. So I understand why they didn't do it. But I thought that was an interesting point.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. But like, it just seems like there's odd, because I've also used Flycam, and like you can fly through Neon and get through all of the places, and it's fine. It's just sometimes the NPCs don't load properly on the other side of those places. Yep. So it's obvious that the loading screen is more like trying to unload some NPCs and load them some others.
Yeah,
it's trying to do some small like resource management, so it doesn't chunk as hard. But I think that's one thing I've seen a lot of people point out is like, there's an excessive amount of loading screens for a game that came out in 2020.
There's an early mission where like you board a space station, I think. Yeah. And like you load from your ship into the space station into a room, and then you go to the next door in that room, and it's another loading screen into the next spot. And I'm like, this is just a room in between two loading screens. It's impressive.
Yeah, and it's hard to, because there's other times where like you go into, say, like an open area. Like I've landed at a place where they had like a science facility, and there's one of those, hey, there's some spacers are in this old facility over here, go deal with it. So I went over to that old facility, and that old facility was like 4 levels. It was pretty expansive, and I'm like, there's going to be a loading screen somewhere. And it's like, no loading screens at all. And I'm like, why is there no loading screens in this, but there's a loading screens in like a station that has less people in it? Like, it just seemed like an odd choice, and I don't know the technical aspect behind it, but I do know that that's probably one of my bigger critiques is like it feels like if they took some more time, they could have massaged it so you didn't have as many loading screens, but they just didn't have the time. So
maybe this is getting too technical, but I figured out that, okay, so if you stand outside the ship and you look inside it, it's not rendering the interior, but if you're standing inside, it's rendering everything outside you and the interior. The reason why I think they did this is because the interior is actually saving asset locations for when you place things. And they probably had an issue where they tested the maximum size of a ship and they had lots of assets in it and probably had huge performance issues. So I'm guessing what they did is they're like, all right, we're just going to have to do this loading screen in between. Even if it could handle it for small ships, it probably couldn't handle it for big ships. So we have to unload the assets on the interior of the ship when you exit it, which is why you had that when you go into a station, or why you have it when you exit. It's not that you couldn't do it. I'm sure actually you could probably mod it and make it work where it's seamless, but probably only high-end PCs would be able to run that without a dynamic loading system.
Yeah, I think that's another problem, is that Starfield is held back because it's a console game that's also on PC.
I think that's a huge issue for them, and I don't envy that position. They had to make a game that would work on console, and the Xbox S is not high-end hardware. Yeah. And it runs on that.
That is a limiting factor for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I think the only other critique I would have is, other than the facial animation stuff, which again I think is just more of a symptom of style rather than problems. Because in all honesty, I don't care about loading screens that much. Like I have an SSD; those loading screens happen in seconds. Like sometimes you'll pop into the game. Like the loading screen would be so short that it almost doesn't exist. Sort of thing. So that's not a huge issue. I think this is going to sound weird, but I think there's just too much to do. It's an overload for players.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's reflective.
It's a good
of that.
thing. I think it's a good thing. I love it.
It is. I think that's a reflective, like the IGN score that a lot of people were shitting on because they gave him a 7 out of 10 because he was like, I would have given it worse. Because I think it's because it's mostly that was the main problem that person was having was there's just so much that, and it doesn't teach you how to do it necessarily. It does there's a text prompt on the screen. It takes the key and just kind of throws it at your face and goes, tab will get you where you need to go. You know,
That's definitely something I noticed is like there really is not much to tell you like what you can do in the game. You kind of have to stumble into the system and then it tells you more about it. Like I didn't know how to do any sort of spaceship customization for a while because I didn't actually know where to go to do it. And then I finally found the technician. I was like, oh, okay. I thought maybe it was going to be something I had to do through some sort of a bench or something, but yeah, there's so much in this game to do, and you really have to explore to figure it all out, which I think is something people enjoy in these types of games. I mean, that's one of the main things people keep talking about with Baldur's Gate 3. It's like, yeah, there's so many things. They really show that they respect your time and that if you go off and do something random, they reward you for it by showing you a new mechanic or something.
Yeah, I think the problem that Bethesda has is twofold. Number one is that they've been critiqued in the past for their intro sequences sucking. Every single Bethesda game has a mod which mods out you having to go through that entry sequence again. And it's almost always the most popular mod that is ever done for that game. Fallout 4, Skyrim, Oblivion, Fallout 3, all of them have I think even Morrowind has a mod where you just start wherever you want. They have like a list of places you can start with. Then you just start and you go. It's like five seconds. A new life mod, and it's always one of the most popular mods. And it's because people just don't care after the 4,000th time they've played it, which kind of is a weakness I would say of Bethesda games as a whole. And while I think Starfield does a better job of it than other games, the problem is that by other of their games, I should say, the problem is that you still end up with here's the keys to the spaceship. Here's a 2-minute tutorial on how to fight in a spaceship. Go to this place and kill the boss. But there's no other limitations. You just do that. And when I first started playing it, I was just like, I'm going to explore a little bit around. I could explore a little bit. And I explored around and, got overwhelmed and didn't know how to use the scanner properly. And like, there's a lot of like little things in the game that are not telegraphed well or not done well. And I feel like they could have done them with quests that are like tutorial quests almost, that are optional for people rather than being kind of like, throw the thing at you. And I don't think they really do that because like the main quest just goes. Once you get to the lodge, it just goes. There's no real like stopping and telling you how to play the game. It's like we're going, we're doing this thing. So,
and to be honest,
go ahead.
Sorry, to be honest, I haven't. Like I said, I really haven't played enough games over the last 5 years, enough different games to have a good idea of how that relates to other games. I think the last RPG I really sank time into, besides maybe Cyberpunk 2077, was probably The Witcher 3. And that was like 6 or 7 years ago. So it's certainly, I wouldn't say I'm the best judge of how a game should be formatted for this kind of stuff. But I do agree with you, especially on the scanning stuff. They don't even tell you that some of the resources that you're looking for, you can't actually mine. I'm assuming that you have to build an outpost to get them, but I haven't been told that in the game yet.
Yeah. Or you have to find a place for them. That's another problem that I have with it. Is just like the crafting system in Fallout 3 was, I think, too simple, or Fallout 4 was too simple. But I think the crafting system in Starfield is too complex. Researching things, which is locked behind skill sets that you have to unlock, and then each individual item requires its own components. Which are sometimes interchangeable with one another. And there's, I don't know how many resources, 100, 200 resources that are all unique. And sometimes they're only useful for like one thing. So you have to go out and find it. And it's incredibly hard to find it unless you go out to a shop and buy it. And then so they do have some benefits, but I think that system is a benefit because it means people can really dig in and kind of do what they want, but it's also a drawback because it can also cause overload. We're just like, I just want to scope on my gun, man. I just want to scope on my gun. I don't want to have to go 4 different places to find the resources so I can make a scope. I can't even buy a scope in the game, which I think is a problem because there's so many people out there who are like, I don't want to go out there with my laser beam and mine rocks. I just want to put a scope on my gun and go shoot things, So
that was one of the critiques.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was one of the critiques on the IGN review, I think, right? Was that there wasn't a map to tell you exactly where all like the vendors were and stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would make sense to have like a mini map that you can just pull up and be like, hey,
oh
here's where all the vendors are.
I was going to do an architect reviews of the landing zones, actually. And one of the things I wanted to say was that I wish they had done a map. Because if you go up to one of the kiosks, all it says is, here are a list of the things that are here. Or, well, thanks, but I want to know where they are.
Yeah. Like, it doesn't need to be a mini map per se, but like the...
No, I mean like a map. Like,
right?
literally a map. Like, show me the map of the place.
Yeah.
Like, literally in the game. Yeah. Like standing there like they do in Star Citizen, like, oh, it's over here. All right, I'll go over there. Just remember the map. Like you do it in world.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they didn't.
You are here, a little icon, but then you can just like pan around a little digital map, and that's it. And but only at the kiosk. Yeah.
Like you're in
I'm
a mall.
surprised they didn't make the watch work more like the Pip-Boy from Fallout.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the watch is a leftover remnant of some of that because like it's obviously the key to get you into the lodge, but it's like I don't know how much use it is after the initial setup. It feels kind of like it's forgotten.
No, it's guys. It's technically that little circular thing in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. That's the watch.
That's the watch.
Well,
that's the watch.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what it's.
But like I always liked that little aspect of like you look down at your arm and you're doing stuff on the menu, and I don't know. It's a small surface. Maybe they could have done something holographic, project a holographic map or something.
See, you know what I think they should have done is they should have linked the watch you get from the Constellation series to the game, so it updates in real time.
You can,
exactly.
Just like
they should have done that.
Like the Pip-Boy app they did for Fallout 4. So
I am not familiar with that, but exactly that.
They did that, where they basically you could get an app for your phone, and then it would be able to support a certain types of phone. Then you could slot in your phone into this oversized Pip-Boy that literally had your inventory on it, so you could access your Pip-Boy from your phone and then kind of change it around.
That sounds horribly impractical, but the actual
clunky.
Watch they made is from what I can see is amazingly good. I mean, it would have been great if they just done it with that. It would have been so much more convenient. But it doesn't solve the map problem. But I wish they had done a holographic map or something. I agree.
So let's talk about, and we've talked about kind of the goods and the bads. Let's talk about the hype, because this game had a lot of lead up. Microsoft pushed the hell out of this game. And there was a lot of hype. I mean, in our communities, I'm sure we all saw the sometimes civil, other times absolute monstrous discourse around this game in the gaming communities. It's especially since it's only on Xbox and PC. It's not on PlayStation, and a lot of people who are Bethesda fans who own Sony consoles are really upset about it. There are,
oh my gosh.
There's a lot of people from other space games who feel like this is a threat. I know plenty of Star Citizen fans who thought like, oh, this is it's just going to be a garbage game. And so many people who wanted to see this destroy other space games, come out about it. So let's talk about the hype. Does this game live up to its hype? And I'll start with you, Morphologis. What do you think? Do you think this game lives up to its hype?
I mean, for the hype that I had, yeah. It met all my expectations and surpassed them in some ways. So yeah, it did. But if you're gonna say like that guy that was hyped because he thought there was gonna be seamless landings, then well, you were totally wrong, dude. You weren't paying attention. So like, it depends on what you mean. I personally think it lives up to the hype. I personally think it does. But everybody's gonna be different. Everybody wants something different out of the game. Like if you're just coming into Starfield as like somebody who just wants to play an RPG game that's good and this has a space setting, fine. You might think, this seems kind of troublesome. I have to go through space and stuff. What are all these rocky moons without animals on them? That seems lame. But I'm a guy who loves space, and this is a freaking space game. So I think it's amazing. All right, we've been starving. This is so good. I love it. So like, I think it depends on who you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Space Tomato, your thoughts? Do you think it lived up to the hype?
It really does depend on who you are, man. There is such a spectrum of expectations for this game. I would say that on the loftier side, people expected this to be a revolutionary game, an actual the first next gen game, which is like, well, it's current gen, so I don't know what you mean by that, but people expected this to be an absolute game changer, and it's not. It's definitely not living up to that. This is a game that had to launch, like we said, on the Xbox S. This is a game that was made by Bethesda, bought by Microsoft, that has a deadline to make and has shareholders to please. This is a game that is coming from a company that doesn't necessarily have the best reputation for stability, although I do think that this game is pretty stable considering their run. But then on the other side of the hype, people expected this to fall flat. They expected it to need mods and upgrades and bug fixes in order to be anything good. They expected it to be a boring, just not really unique game. And I don't think it hit that either. I think it hit in the middle where honestly the majority of people were kind of sitting, which was Skyrim in space. I think it was JV maybe, called it No Man's Skyrim. And it's not exactly that, right? But I think it does a very good job of, like Morph said, being a space RPG. That's all we needed, was a good space RPG to play. Like, literally, the bar is pretty low for the genre. And I think it definitely met that hype. It gives you good quests. It gives you interesting characters. It gives you interesting dialogue, planets to go to, spaceships to fly in. You can build spaceships. That's pretty cool. I haven't played another game where I can build spaceships and then go walk around inside of them. And they might not be all that applied, but the idea that I can go in here, put all these rooms on my spaceship, load into the game, walk around those rooms and have interactive things on them is pretty cool. So I don't think this is a revolutionary game. Like you said, I think it's an evolutionary game. It is a Bethesda game. But it takes a step forward in the overall AAA gaming space. It kind of helps the narrative around gaming proceed in saying, hey, space games, we're here. We're still good. We can still produce. People should still be interested in playing them.
We could still make overall, $1 billion, in or whatever ungodly amount of money Microsoft's about to make. So,
I think it gets the job done on what it needed to do, and I look forward to seeing how this IP progresses, because Microsoft is going to put all their weight behind it now. We're going to see a Starfield 2 or whatever they might want to call it, some 15 years, I don't know. But yeah, I think it was overhyped in some ways, underhyped in others. And, if you were paying attention, like Morph said, it probably hits where you thought it would. And I think it's a pretty good game.
I will say, in terms of hype, I'm going to kind of side with both y'all on this one. I think it really depends on who you were. I think the only thing that was really hyped that a lot of people were disappointed in is it's not seamless travel around a world. That there are loading, like there are walls, but
if you were paying attention to what they said, they never technically said that was possible. I mean, like they tried to say it. You could tell looking at what Todd was saying that he was saying that they're generating tiles, but he didn't explicitly say, you run up to the edge and says you can't go any further. So people were just assuming you could, but he never said you could.
I think Pete Hines made a mistake with his tweet on that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, Tomato, I'm going to throw this back to Starfield Direct, which was that this year or last year? I think it was this year. You and I watched it live together and talked about it afterwards. And I think you and I both said, we think that there's a boundary, there's an invisible wall from when you land. And when we said that, there was at least 2 or 3 people in my comments and your comments who were like, "Oh, you just are, Star Citizen lover. You just gotta hate Starfield. Of course, it's going to be seamless planetary travel." And I'm like, I don't know. They seem to be very cagey about talking about if it was seamless planetary travel, they would just say it because they want to brag about it. Todd would have said it in his typical Todd voice, but he didn't.
See, we who have been trained well under the under the,
The
tutelage
tutelage.
of
Yeah.
of Star Citizen. We know well not to speculate on what they.
Yeah.
If they're not showing it to you, haha, that doesn't mean it exists. That means it doesn't exist. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, no. When I saw those first previews a year ago, only cutscenes going in and out of atmosphere, I knew immediately there's no seamless transitions. There's only cutscenes. It's a loading screen. And
Yeah.
sure enough.
And you know the funny one that I remember when it first came out, when the very first gameplay reveal came out, and they showed the ship land, and then they showed, I think, the person like walking off the gate. They made sure to show a ladder, and everybody's like, "Oh, ladders in a Bethesda game!" Like everybody was excited about it, but that ladder's a loading screen, and you can't get ladders on your ship. But I thought that was funny because they didn't really show any loading screens, I don't think, in that first gameplay section, except maybe when you went into the outpost.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I think they also didn't they make a big deal about how ladders are a bridge too far for the creation engine? Like they just didn't know how to make them work properly, and then that was the big deal for this.
Yeah. But they do have ladders now. So,
they do have ladders.
Happy for them. Yeah.
I will say that, like, for those people, I think there was a lot of other than that one thing where Bethesda and weasel worded their way around. I don't think Bethesda was ever not upfront about what the game was. Like they're like, there's going to be cutscenes from planet side to space. There's fast travel. We wanted to focus on the game being fun. That's what they said, and I'm like, yeah. And I think they delivered everything they said. And
yes,
I think it lives up to the hype if you were paying attention to it. And I think it'll live up to the hype for people who didn't pay attention and just said, hey, a new Bethesda game's come out. Oh, the guys who made Skyrim? Sure, let's check this out. And I think they'll enjoy it.
yeah.
So I think because there's so many camps that are dedicated to seeing this game fail or in some way like kind of flounder, I think there can be a lot of narrative on like, oh, this is it doesn't live up to the hype. But I when Fallout 76 came out and that thing was a disaster at launch, it was YouTube fodder for months. Like, you don't know how much money gaming YouTubers made off of Fallout 76's failure. I'm sure there are millions of views. I'm sure hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, were earned collectively by YouTubers when that came out. So, and I don't see that with Starfield. We don't see the like list of bug compilations or anything else like that. So it feels different, and you would have seen it day one, especially since Bethesda gave out review copies to a lot of people. They gave it to us, and we are not exactly. We're all sci-fi and space content creators, but we're not.
Yeah.
But it's more like, okay, like we could have easily just sat there and done nothing but look for bugs and try to exploit it. But and I know they gave out to people who were a little bit more skeptical, who were a little more harsh on reviews. And even they weren't really dumping on it that hard. So
there's also the Cyberpunk launch to compare this to.
Yeah.
A lot of people will say Cyberpunk came out and the only problem with it was the bugs, but a lot of people, myself included, had critiques about the expectations they said leading up to it. And sure, maybe we might have overhyped ourselves, but if I overhyped myself on Cyberpunk and got disappointed, I absolutely should have overhyped myself on Starfield and gotten disappointed. But I went and played this game, and it's mostly met my expectations. Whereas with Cyberpunk, I do feel like there was a lot of stuff that they kind of at the very least hinted at there being, and that might have been based on the language they used during their gameplay demos. But the reception is different between the two.
Yeah. They clearly bit off more than they could chew, and they couldn't resolve that issue. Whereas Bethesda bit off more than they could chew, and they decided to cut corners where corners could be cut, which were the transitions and the loading screens, just to make it a fun experience.
Yeah. And I can respect them for that, and I think most people will.
Yeah.
And I do think that the hype is justified in the sense that I believe that we will see an increased interest in people making games like Starfield. Not necessarily the Bethesda old style games, but games set RPGs or other games set in space. because
I
this
hope
will
so.
be this will be a financial success. It seems like it's already a financial success. So
I think so. I mean, if it was on the top of the Steam charts, it indicates that it was selling a lot of copies. So
yeah,
I think we're going to see 10 million copies easily.
Yeah.
Probably more than that.
and hopefully what that means is people like EA might bring back Freelancer, which they technically, or no, Microsoft has Freelancer. Wing Commander, like Privateer, they might look at it and be like, we got these old IPs which are space based. We already see that with Star Wars, like Ubisoft with Star Wars. What is it? Outlaw? I can't remember the name. Star Wars, the new Star
Outlaws,
Wars.
yeah.
Outlaws. Yeah. They're kind of dragging that back up. So there's definitely some options for these things to start moving because they can see financial success outside of the indie space.
Yeah.
So
People have been talking in my chat about an old game called Starflight that it sounds like was pretty beloved. It'd be cool to see, some of those IPs in the 90s come back.
yeah, I mean, you'll see. I mean, because they'll pull out the old IPs because they have name recognition, so they're trying to hope to capitalize on them.
The old nerds.
Yes. But also, probably new ideas as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Ubisoft. We do know that who is it? John, or was it Paul Jones? Paul Jones is working for Ubisoft, and it's like, why did they hire a guy who made spaceships for a living for like 8 years to suddenly work for Ubisoft? Maybe there's something going on with Ubisoft because he's not working on the Outlaws team. So, it's like,
That'd be cool.
So let's move on to the very last one because we are all Star Citizen creators. We've heard this line forever, which is Starfield will kill Star Citizen, or Starfield will kill Squadron 42. So I'm going to ask this question, Space Tomato. Is Starfield going to kill, now that it's out and you've played it, do you think it will kill Star Citizen or Squadron 42?
Absolutely. I think they're folding this year. I think they're going to throw in the towel. They're like, oh man, Starfield came out. No point in Star Citizen anymore. No, absolutely not. That was never in the cards. I mean, even the idea that people are saying that Starfield is going to come out and suddenly all of the Star Citizen developers are going to get it in check and start actually developing the game. They're on their own timeline. They're doing their own thing. I do think that maybe they'll see like there are a lot of people out there who want a nice space game to play. But I think they're dealing with enough of their own problems that they don't need Starfield to tell them that they are taking a while. It won't kill the game. It's nothing like the game. It has a lot of appeal to people who like space games, and I think obviously it's going to split people's time in some way. But like you can't even, I mean, like look at the different features in either game. Even just flying to the planet's surface is entirely different. Going on to, like, it's a multiplayer game. It's like being able to be in somebody else's ship and get dropped off on a planetary surface and watch that person fly away to go pick somebody else up or do something else or drop off a vehicle or like release another ship into the air that's supporting you from the air. All that kind of gameplay isn't stuff you can do in Starfield, and that's not going to make or break a game, but that's just indicative of the difference in design. So no, I don't think it's going to kill Star Citizen or Squadron 42. Squadron 42 is a different type of game as well. Honestly, I would say Squadron 42 seems like it reminds me more of like a Mass Effect kind of story, a very bombastic, like cinematic experience, whereas Starfield feels a little more character driven, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, different types of games. There's a lot of space games coming out, and Starfield's not going to kill any of them, I don't think.
Okay. Morph, same question. Will Starfield be killed by will Star Citizen be killed by Starfield?
No, absolutely not. However, I think it would be a mistake to say that it won't affect Star Citizen in any way. I think that even though they're clearly the scopes of these games and what you can do in them is different. The thing is that as great as the the Star Citizen's potential is. It's just potential, and much of what you can experience in the game right now isn't enough to keep people's attention. At least the average silent majority. You can look at it in game sales compared to Starfield, and you'll see that just more people just want to play a game right now. So I definitely think it's going to affect their sales, at least for this quarter. And going forward, I think it's also going to make people say, where's all this content? You guys have been working for 10 years, $600 million, and this is the only content we have. Like, I think that I know the reason for that. It's Squadron 42, but that's what people are going to say when they look at it. You can't avoid that. It is what it is. But the scope of Star Citizen and the enthusiast community that backs it will continue to back it. I don't think that those people will disappear, but it does hurt the potential for new people coming in for a short time. And I also think that looking at it, even myself, I look at it and say, wow, look what CIG could have done if their focus wasn't split between Star Citizen and Squadron. Like, they could have done so much more. I know they could have. You can see the tech that they're doing is great. The ships and everything, it's all, the potential is all there. It's just that they're putting so much of their effort into this game that we have no idea what's going on with. So yeah, it's going to hurt the game a little bit. It's not going to kill it though.
Yeah, definitely more short term than long.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I will make the bold prediction and also kind of agree with both y'all. No, Star Citizen isn't going to die. I have heard so many games are going to kill Star Citizen, and none of them have done so. No Man's Sky, for instance. No Man's Sky didn't have a great launch, but No Man's Sky is infinitely better and has much more features than Star Citizen has, probably will ever have, but it's still not killed it. Elite Dangerous Odyssey had problems, but it didn't kill Star Citizen. I remember when
killed Elite Dangerous.
Yeah. I remember when people were saying that Infinite Warfare, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, was going to kill Star Citizen. It was like, what? Are you high? Everyone's looking for the killer app, the thing that's going to kill the other game. It's been around since Doom, So the idea of one game supplanting another is always big there, whether it be a genre or in the market as a whole. But I do think that Star Citizen will definitely, CIG will definitely feel the financial pinch from this releasing, because the problem is that it's releasing at a time when Star Citizen, when CIG is hurting CIG. Like, we've already been seeing a reduction in funding. Like, this year, they're not going to make as much money as they made last year. They're still making more money than they've made any other previous year, but we're definitely going to see less investments, and that's because they're just at this plateau. Like, there's
a big context to this that I think is worth talking about, and that's that they've taken on way more developers from last year and the year before that. So even though they may have the same funding as they did 2 years ago, they have way more people. So that's not good for CIG.
No, and some big purchases.
Yeah.
Does that mean that they're going to be collapsing overnight or collapsing by the end of the year? Probably not. Anything is possible, but I don't think so. There's nothing in that cards. I think a lot of people were hoping that this game, the Starfield, would put CIG to the fire, put their feet to the fire, but that's not how development works. Like, for Star Citizen, it would take them 6 months at least to pivot development, 6 months to a year to pivot, because it's like turning a tanker when you do with development, especially with a development team of over 1,000 people over 3 continents, or 2 continents, 4, 5. How many countries now? Like 4 or 5 countries. I think
it's 5. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not 3 different languages. So it's not an easy turn to take. So I think people who come up with that idea are just don't understand how. I hate to say the cliche, they don't understand how development works, but it's not, Star Citizen's not a light, agile development team. It's pretty beefy. So,
and it's like you said, like they hurt themselves. The only thing that's going to kill Star Citizen is Star Citizen. Like, they have a lot going for them. It's just a matter of, can they put it together? And I mean, they're not going to shift their development all over the place because they're very stuck on 2 things: Squadron 42 and server meshing. And It's not like they can just look at Starfield and be like, they have really good missions. Instead of server meshing, why don't we work on missions? They've got people working on missions. They've got probably as many people as they can afford to work on missions while they're building the things that they deem as most important. And I don't think they're going to shift from those things. Like Morph said, they are all in on Squadron. And the next step in Star Citizen, the one that they set out all the way back in, I think, 2018 or 2019 as the road to release, is server meshing. So I just don't see how they would shift their priorities other than maybe, making the game stay a little bit more stable. But again, server meshing.
So in general, I think the answer is no. I think people who have predicted Star Citizen's downfall and death have always predicted Star Citizen's downfall and death and are always wrong. Because you would see a lot more signs. There would be very different signs. Do I think it will hurt CIG's player base? Yes. I mean, there will be people who play playing Starfield either now or on the 5th or 6th, on the 6th when it comes out, who will never come back to Star Citizen. But there are people who did that with Elite, who've done that, like they played Star Citizen and played to Elite and then never came back to Star Citizen, or No Man's Sky or other things. That always happens. People aren't a monolith. People don't you can't just play one game. I'm playing Starfield. I'll probably play Starfield for a while. There's a lot of lore. So I'm going to be covering Starfield because I'm a lore guy and they've got a lot of cool stuff. And people seem to like it. So I'm going to do it. But at the same time, like, I'm not going to never come back to Star Citizen. And you never know how many people are the same way, where they're playing a game and they make it go off to play, Dark and Darker or, the next Call of Duty that comes out, and then be like, cool, I'm just going to play this game for a while. And then they'll come back to Star Citizen. That's how gamers are. They flit around the place a lot. It's very few people stick to one game forever. So you were going to say something before?
Video games are like butterflies.
You can say something more.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think everybody, this thing keeps happening where people say this is going to be the killer Star Citizen, but I don't know what it is. Maybe it's media has misrepresented how advanced we are with technology. And I think that a lot of people think that it's super easy for us to create a virtual world with everything we have now in a computer, but it's actually extremely complicated and hard to do. So the hard truth is that there are no shortcuts. If you want an everything game that's got like a fully simulated full scale universe, it's going to take hundreds of millions of dollars, tens of years, thousands of developers. You can't cut corners and get around it. No engine is going to solve that problem. No tool. It just takes a lot of time because there's too much content to make. They need time to make that content. Does it make the wait any better? No, but it's just the truth. There's not going to be a Star Citizen killer because nobody's crazy enough to try to do it. It's too expensive. And this proves it. It's too expensive.
It takes too much time. It's too expensive, and as a result, it's not profitable enough. Like Starfield,
isn't. It's not a profitable thing. Like there's nobody's going to be able to repeat Star Citizen. Nobody, because nobody's going to be able to get funding like this. The funding model now, nobody's doing game funding like that anymore. There were too many people who did rug pulls. So like it's the last of a dying breed that still exists.
And I think like even if you had somebody who had like say Jeff Bezos, who had billions of dollars and always wanted to make one game and will just throw money at a game until it's done, I don't think you'll ever see something like that, because that'll take decades, because you actually have to have somebody who cares, people who care in the development team to be able to continue to develop something like that. You can't like throw money at somebody and make it an achievement. It requires passion, it requires time, it requires money, and those three things are really hard to get all at once. And so like Star Citizen's in this perfect storm where it hit, somebody who's been cares about this sort of genre for a long time, Chris Roberts. He's a lot of people who've worked with him in the past. He got a lot of money, and he's had the luxury of taking over a decade to build the game. So, like, will it happen? Does that mean it's going to happen? No, but it's the only reason why the lights are still on and they're able to expand. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think, in general, I think the overall feeling for most of us is we like Starfield. Will I say that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
really enjoying it. I mean, I'm trying to make it the main story last as long as possible, because I know once I love starting a game. I hate ending it. So
Me too. I always avoid going through the ending. I want to experience everything I can, go down every alley, every corner, and then finally get to the end.
Yeah, and this is one of those games for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I have put in at this point, I think over 30, almost 40 hours since like early release and now, and I haven't even advanced the main plot much at all.
Let's put it this way: there are a few games that I've spent that much money on in the past 5 or maybe 10 years that I've spent this much time playing. I think Starfield is definitely. I wasn't exaggerating saying that it has a special place for me now. Starfield does, because as being a space nerd, loving space games, and how much time how it's lived up to the hype for me. I love it. I just looked at my hours. I spent 62 hours so far on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm pretty sure I'm around 30 something, but I agree with you, man. This one's going to be down in the books. I mean, I wouldn't say it's equal to where Mass Effect is in terms of like my head lore, in terms of games that have meant a lot to me, but I can see it getting there. It's a great game.
Yeah, I do want to say one last thing. Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I have this terrible habit of doing that.
You're good. All I was going to say is that I have 39 hours in game. That's what I have right now.
Woo!
So
Y'all are killing me.
yeah.
And I will say this, that after playing for 62 hours, I do think about Star Citizen still and how much I miss flight, the magic of flight. And so it'll never replace it for me. I still want to go back and play Star Citizen. I just don't have. I wish I had 2 versions of me, one that could keep playing Star Citizen and one that could play Starfield simultaneously, so I could keep making content for both of them at the same time, but I can't. I just don't have enough bandwidth. So I still love Star Citizen, and it gives me so much. It excites me to go back and experience the parts that make that game so special. But I still do wish that they had more content like Starfield.
That is the eternal Star Citizen fan problem, which is you play a game, you're like, I'm having fun. This is a different game. It's not Star Citizen. And then about 30, 40 hours in, or sometimes 3 to 10 hours in, you're like, man, I wish it had this. Star Citizen has this. I miss Star Citizen.
Yeah.
Man, this would be great in Star Citizen.
And then you go back and you play, and then you fall through the floor, and you're like, I'm going back to the other game.
I'm going back to the other game. So I think in general, I'll ask the very last question before we end up, which is, because people ask this question all the time: is it worth it? And so I'll start off with my opinion, which is I don't think Starfield is worth $99 to get it early, and I would hesitate, especially with the amount of question marks that exist with Starfield for me, that in terms of like main story or bugs or other, because I've started to encounter a lot more bugs since release, like floating doors and other issues. They're not really game breaking, but it's just like, oh, that's a bug, and so it's like, I don't know, because I think some people are very particular about their money spending, but I would, buying Game Pass and playing it on day one on the 6th, I think, because this isn't one of those games where you have to go play right away. Like if you wait till the 6th, you could spend 100 hours not even touching the main quest and still have fun. So I would say this is almost certainly a Game Pass game. But if you want to get the physical copy for that, I would definitely suggest, if you have the money and you are a space fan or you're a fan of RPGs and space RPGs, because I wouldn't sit here and be like, hey, you who enjoys Stardew Valley, you'll love Starfield. But in the circles that we tend to be in, almost certainly the full price, or at least the subscription to Game Pass to get it on the 6th would be good. What do you think there, Space Tomato?
It's definitely a Game Pass game. I mean, this is going to sell Game Pass subscriptions like crazy. And Game Pass all around is a good service. I was definitely shilling for it back in the day with my friends, and then I realized they just didn't care. Mm-hmm. I got myself 3+ years of Game Pass for the price of Xbox Live. It was like this whole thing that you would do, and you get a Game Pass for an extra $1, and so I'm paid through on that, and that's how I was going to play it. I wasn't going to buy it to get it early. I thought about it to make content with it, but I was generally going to rely on Game Pass. It is absolutely. It's actually kind of funny. I would say this is not necessarily worth it if you are a space game fan, but this is absolutely worth it if you're an RPG fan. It's a good RPG set in a space world. I would say it's not necessarily a space game in the sense that a lot of people think of space games, that you're flying around a spaceship, that you're going to be like spacewalking and going out in zero G, that you're dealing with the dangers of space, you know, running out of oxygen or fuel and stuff like that. It is a very, very fun space-themed RPG, but for a space game fan, somebody who's looking at Empyrean or X4 or Elite Dangerous or No Man's Sky or Star Citizen, I wouldn't say this is something that you need to pick up. This is like, you're going to want to like RPGs. You're going to want to like traditional AAA RPGs. You know what I mean? Like sometimes repetitive content. Sometimes you feel like you're treading water when you're doing crafting and stuff. It's not a definite absolute suggestion, but I think it's very good. I think it's worth the $70 buy price. It's worth the Game Pass subscription, but you should still, as always, do your own research on it and do some looking into it yourself before you jump.
All three of us, or I think more. Do you have a review out more for it, or?
Yeah, I've got a review. Yeah.
So all three of us have reviews, which you can watch as well, which will tell you a little bit with gameplay footage. I can tell you a little bit more. Morph, your recommendation. Would you recommend this game?
So hard to recommend people buy anything. I never do that in any of my reviews. I always tell people to make their own decision based on what they want. But as somebody who loves space games, I love this. So I know what Space Tomato is saying, because if you're coming into this expecting like fully Newtonian physics space flight and being able to hook up your joysticks to fly, this isn't going to give you that experience. But I think that I've been focusing heavily on the space game for my video, doing a lot of space combat and a lot of manufacturing ships, and I've really enjoyed it a lot. It's not like you're not dealing with leaks and oxygen or stuff like that, as you said. It's not a sim, but it's pretty good. I like it a lot, and I mean, I love the back and forth between going up into space and fighting, and then going onto the ground and exploring, and then coming across aliens and stuff. So I would say if you like the space game genre and RPGs, this might be for you. This might be for you.
So I think that we're gonna wrap this up there. We were not gonna do question answers. Usually we do, but it's like the butt crack of morning for Morphologis right now. So I want to make sure he can sleep and do other things and play more Starfield.
Yeah, I need to get my video up tomorrow, and I've got so much more cutting to do, and I have to write and record my script. So I've got a lot left to do tomorrow.
That was me on Thursday. I had to do 2 reviews, and I hadn't finished writing the script, and I was like, I'm just not going to sleep. So I got about 2 hours of sleep before the game launched, but I managed to get all of the reviews out. I was like, yes, I'm so tired though. So.
Yeah.
And of course, make sure you check out Morphologis on YouTube and Twitch and Twitter and all of the places. And Space Tomato on Twitch, YouTube, and of course Space Tomato 2 TOO as well for his other more like live and off the cuff content. And of course, if you enjoy this, we cover Starfield as well. And if you, I'll be covering more Starfield lore on my other channel, The Astro Historian. Already have, and we'll be doing more. I will say before we go there, Space Tomato, it was funny because we were where were we? I was in a spot. I think it was in New Atlantis, and they had the kind of like the call, almost like a call to prayer show up here in the soundtrack, and everyone in my chat was like, "Is Space Tomato there, Paul? Is that what's going on? Why is there Space Tomato's call to prayer suddenly in the middle of New Atlantis?" He's still going. He's still going.
I try to time it in between his sentences, but it is a theme now. There he is.
You should just start playing that like at random times. Take that clip from Starfield and play it and see if people just start, like just look all confused, like it's not 3:00. What is going on? But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you check out their content and their videos. And if you like space in general, this podcast is dedicated mostly to Star Citizen. So you can come back next week. We'll talk a little bit more about Star Citizen stuff. Usually that is at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And would love to have you come by and join us. As always, make sure you like the video if you enjoyed this, and you can watch these other